my name's Rob Lee. As Kate said, I'm an ultra endurance mountain biker. I'm going to give a short presentation and then show a short section from a film which the actual film involves quite a few different cyclists from different disciplines. The first section is my section, and I'll show you that at the end of this. I'm going to run through several slides, and as you can see from the introduction, I'm going to just cover a few things. I'm going to cover a bit about the racing I've done, and then the second thing will be the South Downs double, which was a pivotal point for me really as an athlete. It changed the way I looked at my sport. Talk a little bit about my philosophy regarding my sport and the way I approach it now, and then the 7 Deadly Spins is a project of my own, and that sort of ties in with working with Reset Films, who made the section of the film I'm going to show you at the end. So to start with my racing, I started racing in 1993, so all 19 seasons now I've been racing a bike. I started with mountain biking. I've also raced almost all the disciplines in cycling, as well as off-road duathlon. Before I started cycling, I was a semi-professional skateboarder, sponsored athlete, a bit different from cycle racing, and it was a strange transition really to cycling from skateboarding. Skateboarding was quite, how should we say, a fashionable sport, if you like, in many ways, and an unfashionable sport in others. As a child growing up doing that, I got into cycling because the friends I grew up with were all cyclists at the time, and most of them were juniors on the world's team. So I got quite a thrashing when I started cycling. I got taken out and beasted in the woods most days. For that reason, probably that reason alone, I got my elite licence in three seasons of racing, which at the time was quite unusual. It's still fairly unusual to go all the way through the categories to elite 3 seasons. At the time, mountain biking's changed quite a lot over the last few years, the last 10 years say. When I started, there was cross country or downhill, and that was it. Now there's all sorts of distances and disciplines and different bikes for those different disciplines, but at the time there was only cross country if you were not a downhiller. So that was the path I took. I found from my 6 years, I rode elite cross country for 6 years. In that time, I found I never really got the top end speed. So the highest I ever finished in the country was 10th in the national rankings, but I wasn't really top national standards. So I did find that if the races were too long, occasionally I got the course wrong, I got the distance wrong, I would always do better. And that sort of the end of my elite cross-country career coincided with endurance taking off in the UK, and also on the world stage as a sport. So in 2003, I raced my first 12-hour race, which was Dusk to Dawn, which at the time was one of the main races in the country. There's a lot of them now, and it's kind of dropped a little in its status, but at the time it's one of the biggest ones. I did that as my first sort of trial at the end of the season, and I won that quite convincingly. And from there, I transitioned very quickly into the longer races. I found that whereas I didn't have the top end speed, I could hold the speed I had much longer, and I was just lucky really that my sport changed. I was in the right place at the right time really. As endurance came about in the UK, I found I was an endurance rider. I went to the World Championships in 2005. On my age group, I was the Masters World Champion that year. I also finished 11th overall, so it was a fairly, whereas cross country took me a very long time to get fairly high up, I suddenly found myself very, very good at another division of the sport quite easily. Due to it being quite easy, in relative terms, I found that I soon found myself wanting something else. So I tried for years and years and years to be a good cross-country rider, never quite made it as high as I wanted to get. Suddenly I was very good at a new division of the sport, and while, while it's quite difficult to ride a bicycle for 24 hours, once you find you can do it, it's a very big emotional and physical commitment to keep doing it. So once I found I'd won races and I repeated the formula year on year, by sort of 2007 I was looking for something else. I found this. The South Downs Way goes from Winchester to Eastbourne, for those who don't know. It's predominantly off-road, it's not entirely off-road. And at the time there was a challenge, as it were, that a lot of mountain bikers were talking about as an idea for the next stage for what we were doing. At the time I started looking at, there were only 3 other riders who completed it in 24 hours. So the idea was to take what we did in a racing environment where we raced round and round in circles, 10-mile circles where there's a pit and there's marshals and there's safety, and ride from one place to the other and back again. At the time I started looking at it, I was wondering if I could take it sort of one step further than it had already been. So the 3 guys who did it before me, had all followed the same protocol. They had a guy in a van or 2 guys in a van. They had all their kit in the van and everything that they used to use in a pit. Those guys would drive along and meet them everywhere on the course. I decided to put everything in the bag and see if I could do it without anyone supporting me. So I put all the gels I need in the bag, spares. I actually put a pump in the bag and found out a week after I did the challenge that it didn't work. It weighed 7 kilos. I thought it was maybe a little bit too heavy, but I thought I'd give it a go. And I went to work for the day in a bike shop. I work in a bike shop. And after work, I drove to the start, met some guys with a clock and set off. I did beat the previous record, and at the same time I found a new kind of cause for the way I saw my sport. So when I'd won races before, I'd been to the Worlds or whatever, I'd always done a lot of stuff with magazines or the web, and part of what I do is trying to inspire others to enjoy the sport and to try things beyond their sort of remit or beyond their sort of current level as they see it. I've been teaching skills since the mid-90s, coaching athletes since the late 90s. I started my own team in 2005 and brought like a dozen athletes who weren't sponsored, provided them sponsorship and brought them through to national standard as endurance athletes. I found with the South Downs double, compared to my previous racing, the racing would hit, you know, a fairly big audience, but not that big in a niche of the sport. When I did the South Downs double, I couldn't answer my emails quick enough. We did a live tracker for the return journey, and for the last 6 hours it had 8,000 hits. From there I decided that there was possibly a better way to hit more people, and started looking into ways to do that. This kind of brings me on to my philosophy. I didn't really come to this myself. I keep in touch with a lot of people I've been involved with in racing, and I wrote a book recently about some of my racing and my riding, and a few people around the world sort of put some money in and funded that. One of the people who funded it was Stuart Dorland, who runs the 24 Hours of Adrenaline World Championships. And after he read the book, he sent me this quote. And that, whilst that's not my philosophy per se, that kind of sums up the way I look at my sport. So I didn't set out to be a leader, but I understand that to inspire people you need to you need to have got to a certain level for people to listen, and then to actually show that it can be done, you need to actually do it. And the big thing for me is helping other people to do it. So whilst there's a lot of guys who ride the sort of riding I do, and there's a lot of riders who do it better than I do, there's very few of them, I think, who actually teach people to do it better than they do. So that's kind of the thing for me, that's what I like to do. In 2008 I retired from racing officially. I've still been racing ever since. It was to start this. So the 7 Deadly Spins was my idea of replicating the South Downs Double. We came up with 7 rides, and the idea was that we would explore, inspire, progress. And they were, to break those down, the Explore was to actually find the rides. The South Downs Double have been talked about. There's a lot of trails in the UK, some of them you're allowed to ride, some of them you're not. And the Explore was finding ones that would meet the same sort of criteria, whilst each challenge built on the other. So that was the first stage. Hand in hand with that was the Inspire. You know, if you can go out and you can do something, if nobody knows about it, nobody's inspired. So there was myself and 3 others involved with the project. I kind of led it, and some of the other guys did some of the rides and got some of the exposure. But the idea was to tell the story. People hear the story, they're inspired to try their own thing, whether it's bigger, smaller, or to try the same thing. And then the last stage of that was Progress, which I've just started recently. The project's been running for 3 years. This last 6 months is all about teaching people how we do it, how we do those rides. So we've broken it down into like a strategy for preparing for the rides, and we're demonstrating it with live rides on some of the challenges. We go out, we're running it as a live tracker, but instead of doing a ride in 24 hours, we're breaking it down into 2 days or 3 days, which is a ride we normally do prior to the bit people have already seen. Whilst we were doing that, we worked with a lot of the major websites, a lot of the major magazines, and then just quite by chance really, we started working with I say a company. Reset Films is a personal project of the guy who owns it, Mark Huskinson. He's an editor by trade and a mountain biker by passion, I suppose. And he combines the two to make films about cycling and cyclists and their experiences. And so we wanted to, with Mark, we sat down and we came with a plan so that people could kind of access a bit more of what we do. So with film media, people can actually see what it's like. They can get a bit of understanding of what we do, and perhaps with a bit of luck, understand a bit of the why of what we do. And now I'd like to show you a section of Refined, which is Mark's second film. It shows the 3rd ride in the series that I did, which is called The 7 Stains in 24 Hours. The 7 Stains is a collection of mountain bike centres across the Scotch borders. The first one was built about 12 years ago, and they've built on the infrastructure over the years. The International Mountain Bike Association voted it the most important place to visit as a mountain biker 2 years running. So it's a very big network of trails. Amongst that, they have 7 red graded trails, red being technical, experienced rider trails, I suppose. And their guidelines for riding it, depending on your fitness level, for a combined time of all those 7 trails is between 9.5 and 19 hours. The bit we added to it with the challenge is that the distance between the first one and the last one, if you go via all of them, is 157 miles. So we added a load of road riding to a load of mountain biking, and thought that challenge kind of embraced the crossover of a lot of riders of our sort of era, if you like. And the idea was to try and ride the whole lot in one go in less than 24 hours. So I'll show you that now.